Levon Helm sat behind his drum kit like a guardian of American musical tradition.
Levon Helm was more than just a drummer. He was a guardian of American musical traditions, keeping time with what he called the heartbeat of the South and defending authentic rhythm against anything that threatened to corrupt it. These were the first songs he remembered learning about harmonies, and they shaped his entire approach to music. Beneath his gentle Arkansas accent and humble personality burned a fierce need to protect what drumming should truly represent. He had absolutely no patience for players who betrayed what he considered sacred musical principles. Helm believed that drumming wasn't about showing off or drawing attention to yourself. As he explained to a young musician in 1982, drumming ain't about showing off. It's about serving the song and keeping the community together through rhythm. These words became his standard for judging every drummer he encountered. Whether they used circus tricks or mechanical precision, Helm's dislike for certain players wasn't just professional criticism. It was cultural warfare between authentic American music and everything he saw as threatening to destroy it. These conflicts revealed a man who believed drumming was a sacred responsibility, not a chance for personal glory. He saw himself as the backbone of the band and keeper of roots music heritage. While he was famous for his quiet dignity, he was also known for his harsh judgment of drummers who chose flashy performances over solid foundation. His battles with these 6 drummers show how deeply he cared about preserving the true spirit of American rhythm. Tommy Lee, The Circus Act. Starting with number 6 on Helm's list of problematic drummers was Tommy Lee from Motley Crue. Helm's disgust with the heavy metal showman wasn't about Lee's rock and roll lifestyle or his wild behavior. Instead, it was about watching Lee turn drumming into a carnival act that completed. Lee ignored music's deeper purpose. The problem started in the mid-1980s when Lee's spinning drum solos and upside-down drum kits dominated MTV coverage. According to Joe Smith, a former executive at Capitol Records, Helm watched one of Lee's performances on television and immediately turned it off. He told his wife Sandy, "That boy's forgotten that drums are supposed to support music, not distract from it. He's treating his kit like a playground instead of an instrument." This reaction showed how deeply Lee's approach offended Helm's musical sensibilities. What really bothered Helm wasn't Lee's energy or enthusiasm, but his priorities. While Helm had spent decades perfecting the art of making drums disappear into a song's natural flow, Lee was becoming famous through what Helm called acrobatic nonsense and drumming that puts the show ahead of the music every single time. For Helm, this represented everything wrong with modern drumming. Helm believed that real drumming should make people feel the song more deeply, not make them forget there was a song happening at all. As he told Modern Drummer magazine in 1987, rhythm should enhance rather than overshadow musical content. The philosophical divide became obvious when both approaches were being celebrated simultaneously in different musical circles. At a 1988 music industry conference, witnesses said Helm walked out during a discussion about innovative drumming techniques. He later told the organizers, "Innovation means better music, not better stunts." Meanwhile, Lee seemed unaware of Helm's criticism and continued focusing on his own theatrical evolution. But for Helm, Lee represented the dangerous trend of spectacle replacing substance and entertainment value, destroying musical integrity. Lars Ulrich, The Machine. At number 5 was Helm's battle against mechanical precision, embodied by Lars Ulrich of Metallica. Helm's criticism of the Danish metal drummer wasn't about his aggression or power. Instead, it was about watching Ulrich's rigid, computerized approach strip all human warmth and natural swing from what should be a living, breathing rhythm. The disappointment grew throughout the late 1980s, when Metallica's machine-like precision was being praised as the future of drumming. Mike Klink, a former producer at Geffen Records, said Helm listened to Metallica's Master of Puppets album once and shook his head. He told Klink, "That boy's playing like he's punching a time clock. There's no soul in it, no conversation with the other musicians, just hammering away like he's building a fence." This reaction showed how Ulrich's approach violated everything Helm believed about rhythm. What troubled Helm wasn't Ulrich's power or technical ability, but his approach to timing. While Helm had built his reputation on subtle pushes and pulls that made songs breathe naturally, Ulrich was achieving success through what Helm called robotic pounding, and drumming that sounds like it was programmed by computers instead of felt by human hands. For Helm, this represented the death of musical feeling. Helm believed that music needed to swing and sway like a living thing. As he told Rolling Stone in 1989, he thought perfect timing actually killed the musical magic that made songs special. The cultural gap widened when metal fans began expecting all drummers to match Ulrich's precise attack. At a 1990 drum clinic, witnesses said Helm refused to demonstrate double bass techniques, telling the audience, "I'm here to teach you how to make music dance, not how to make it march." While Ulrich seemed focused on his own technical development rather than traditional approaches, Helm saw him as representing the mechanization of rhythm, replacing human feel with industrial precision. Stuart Copeland, the show-off. Number 4 brought us to Helm's frustration with complexity for its own sake, represented by Stuart Copeland of The Police. Helm's irritation with the British-American drummer wasn't about his punk energy or technical skill. Instead, it was about watching Copeland overload songs with busy patterns that destroyed the simple groove foundation that actually made music move people. The problems peaked during the early 1980s when the Police's intricate arrangements were being celebrated for their sophistication. Jerry Moss, a former executive at AM Records, said Helm studied Copeland's playing with growing annoyance. Helm told him, "Stuart's got more chops than he knows what to do with, but he's using every single one in every single song. Sometimes the best thing a drummer can do is shut up and let the music breathe." What bothered Helm wasn't Copeland's skill level, but his lack of restraint. While Helm had mastered the art of playing exactly what each song needed and nothing more, Copeland was achieving acclaim through what Helm called show-off drumming, and patterns so busy they distract listeners from the actual melody and story. This violated Helm's core belief about the drummer's role. Helm believed that great drumming should be invisible until you take it away. As he told Musician magazine in 1983, rhythm should support rather than compete with songs. The generational divide became clear when younger drummers began copying Copeland's complex approach. At a 1984 music workshop, witnesses said Helm demonstrated a simple shuffle beat and commented, "This groove has moved people for 100 years, but now everyone thinks they need to reinvent the wheel every 4 bars." While Copeland seemed proud of his innovative techniques rather than concerned with traditional values, Helm saw him as representing drumming's overthinking epidemic, replacing natural groove with intellectual complexity. Phil Collins, the factory worker, number 3 revealed what Helm saw as a session musician nightmare in Phil Collins. Helm's resentment toward the Genesis drummer turned superstar wasn't about his pop success or commercial appeal. Instead, it was about watching Collins transform drumming from an instinctive musical conversation into a calculated studio-perfected product that lost all spontaneity and human connection. The problems intensified during the 1980s when Collins was dominating both radio and session work with his polished approach. Tom Dow, a former engineer at Atlantic Records, said Helm listened to Collins's drum sound on various records and grimaced. He told Dow, "Phil's got everything technically perfect, but where's the heart? He's turned drumming into an assembly line job where every beat sounds exactly like the last one." What disturbed Helm wasn't Collins's competence or technical ability, but what he saw as sterility. While Helm had built his career on responding to musical moments with intuitive fills and subtle variations that made each performance unique, Collins was achieving widespread recognition through what Helm called factory drumming and beats that sound like they came from a drum machine programmed by accountants. Helm believed that music should surprise you sometimes, even surprise the musicians playing it. As he told Mix magazine in 1985, he criticized the trend toward over-rehearsed precision that eliminated what he called musical magic. The philosophical conflict became obvious when Collins's gated reverb sound influenced countless drummers to pursue similar processed perfection. At a 1986 recording session, witnesses said Helm refused to use any electronic processing, telling the engineer, "I want people to hear actual drumsticks hitting actual drums, not some computer's idea of what that should sound like." While Collins seemed focused on achieving commercial consistency rather than preserving musical authenticity, Helm saw him as representing drumming's industrialization, replacing human expression with manufactured reliability. Charlie Watts, the cultural tourist. At number 2, we discover what may have been Helm's most culturally charged grudge against Charlie Watts of the Rolling Stones. Helm's resentment toward the jazz-influenced British drummer wasn't about his technical ability or musical competence. Instead, it was about watching Watts receive praise for interpreting American blues and R&B traditions without truly understanding their cultural roots and emotional origins. The cultural tensions simmered throughout the 1960s and 1970s, when the Rolling Stones were being celebrated as authentic blues practitioners. Al Jackson Jr., a former drummer at Stax Records, said Helm would express his frustrations privately, saying, "Charlie plays those rhythms clean and proper, but he's missing the dirt and pain that created them. He learned blues from records, not from life, and it shows in every beat." What frustrated Helm wasn't Watts' skill level, but his interpretation. While Helm had absorbed American rhythm traditions through direct cultural immersion in the Arkansas Delta region, Watts was achieving international acclaim through what Helm called tourist blues, and rhythm patterns copied without understanding the stories behind them. This represented a fundamental violation of Helm's beliefs about musical authenticity. Helm believed you couldn't fake growing up with music in your bones. As he told Downbeat magazine in 1976, he defended his belief that authentic American rhythm required cultural connection beyond technical study. The issue wasn't about Watts' abilities as a musician, but about the deeper question of who had the right to claim expertise in musical traditions. While Watts seemed unaware of Helm's cultural concerns and remained focused on his own musical development, Helm saw him as representing cultural appropriation. For Helm, Watts was an outsider claiming expertise in traditions he hadn't lived through, receiving praise that should have gone to musicians who had genuinely experienced the cultural roots of the music they played. Ringo Starr, The Ultimate Injustice. Finally, at number 1, we reach what was reportedly the most heartbreaking revelation of all for Levon Helm, his feelings about Ringo Starr. Yes, the Beatles' beloved drummer allegedly earned Helm's ultimate frustration in what became the most painful example of what Helm saw as musical injustice in drumming history. The anguish reportedly began in the mid-1960s, when Starr was receiving worldwide adoration, despite what Helm considered very basic drumming abilities. Alan Livingston, a former executive at Capitol Records, said Helm would watch Beatles coverage with visible pain, telling his close friends, "Ringo gets called one of the greatest drummers alive for playing simple beats that any competent musician learned in their first year. Meanwhile, real masters get ignored because they're not in the right band." What tormented Helm wasn't Starr's personality or character, but what he saw as a massive recognition disparity. While Helm was delivering sophisticated, nuanced drumming that served complex musical arrangements with perfect taste and timing, Starr was achieving legendary status through what Helm called elementary patterns, and drumming so basic that it insults everyone who's actually mastered the instrument. The sense of injustice became unbearable when Starr was consistently ranked among history's greatest drummers in music polls and magazines. This wasn't about jealousy or personal rivalry, but about Helm's deep belief that recognition should be based on musical merit rather than popularity or commercial success. At a 1987 music industry dinner, witnesses said Helm left early when the conversation turned to Beatles drumming. He later confided to his wife, "It breaks my heart that mediocrity gets worshipped while excellence gets overlooked." This reaction showed how deeply the situation affected Helm personally. For Helm, Starr represented everything wrong with how the music industry distributed recognition and respect. While technically accomplished drummers who had spent years mastering their craft remained unknown, Starr achieved worldwide fame and critical acclaim for what Helm considered basic competence. The fact that Starr was consistently praised and ranked among the greatest drummers of all time felt like a personal insult to everyone who had dedicated their lives to truly mastering the instrument. The deeper philosophy. These 6 examples reveal the deeper philosophy that drove Levon Helm's criticism of certain drummers. It wasn't about personal animosity or professional jealousy, but about fundamental beliefs regarding what drumming should represent and accomplish. Helm saw drumming as a sacred responsibility, a way of keeping communities together through rhythm, and a means of serving the song rather than serving the drummer's ego. His frustrations with these 6 drummers represented different threats to what he considered authentic musical expression. Tommy Lee represented spectacle over substance. Lars Ulrich represented mechanical precision over human feeling. Stuart Copeland represented complexity over groove. Phil Collins represented manufactured perfection over spontaneous expression. Charlie Watts represented cultural appropriation over authentic experience. And Ringo Starr represented undeserved recognition over genuine mastery. These weren't just professional disagreements, but cultural battles between different visions of what American music should be. Helm saw himself as defending traditional values against modern trends that threatened to destroy the authentic spirit of rhythm. Whether you agree with his assessments or not, they reveal a musician who cared deeply about preserving the cultural and spiritual foundations of American music. The question remains whether Helm was defending authentic rhythm traditions or nursing wounds from unfair recognition. Perhaps the answer lies in understanding that for musicians like Helm, these weren't separate issues. The recognition given to drummers reflected society's understanding of what drumming should be, and that understanding would influence future generations of musicians. In Helm's view, celebrating the wrong kind of drumming wasn't just aesthetically wrong, it was culturally destructive. His legacy reminds us that behind every musical performance are deeper questions about authenticity, tradition, and the responsibility that comes with artistic influence. Even humble masters can harbor deep wounds when they see their life's work overshadowed by what they consider inferior approaches. The story of Levon Helm's frustrations reveals not just one man's opinions, but the ongoing tension between tradition and innovation, authenticity and popularity, substance and spectacle that continues to shape American music today.